Daniel Crookston was the ninth son of Robert Crookston and Ann Welch. He was husband to Henrietta Rice, who was the sister to Alice Rice, who married Nicholas Crookston. Daniel and Henrietta were the uncle and aunt to Jesse Crookston. Daniel was just the next younger son after David, and they were 2 years apart. They were both Daniel and Henrietta were educated in Logan, Utah. They were married in the Logan Temple on September 6, 1889. Through their thrift and industry, they were able to acquire in Logan a comfortable, well-furnished home, which was the birthplace of their first 4 children, Daniel, Howard, Merrill, and Milton. In 1898, when it was decided to call Latter-day Saints to settle the vast bleak Coney Prairie of Alberta, Canada, he was the first one to be called. The following is written by one of his children, not yet known who wrote it, and they said, their home had to be sold and only essential equipment for setting up housekeeping was shipped to Canada. He also shipped his horses and a few head of cattle, and when they arrived in Helena, Montana, they found Mother's sister, Claire Benson, very ill. Mother and children stayed for a while to help care for her, while Father came to Canada to prepare the way for them. When he arrived at the Canadian border, he was told he could not take his horses over because of the hoof and mouth disease in the United States. The horses were led out and shot, destroying his only means of providing for his family in this strange land. Later, when he became settled, he was forced to do hand labor until he could earn money to buy new horses, which were very high prices because of their scarcity. The railroad went only as far as Lethbridge. He had to go on to Cardston, another 60 miles by stagecoach. Later, when Mother and children came, they had to go by stage in a blizzard. Their trunks of warm clothes had gone on earlier with Father. It was April, and not knowing Canada, they assumed it was spring there. They were also nearly frozen by the time they arrived. Dan, the oldest boy, became seriously ill and developed rheumatism and a mastoid trouble, was unable to place the right foot to the floor for a whole year. As a result, his rheumatism plagued him the remainder of his life. Their first Cardston home was a little one-room log cabin plastered with mud and straw, which leaked when it rained, and it rained so much that year. Father was sent to Magrath, 35 miles east, to work as foreman on the Alberta Irrigation and Railroad Canal, which was being constructed. This left his family alone in Cardston. Their house was near a slaughterhouse, and Indians used to go there to get refuse and meat. Mother saw their faces plastered at the window, curiously looking in. They begged for food. She and the children were terrified and then suffered with fear of them because of the unpleasant memories associated with the Indians in Utah. Canada, with its innumerable miles of flat, barren prairies, looked so vastly different from their home in Utah. Logan, surrounded by beautiful memories that Mother was never able to throw off, she had feelings of homesickness and loneliness. Describing on her first visit of Canada, she said, "You can look as far as you can see and see nothing except more miles of no mountains for a background. Not a railroad, not a road, no fences, homes, or trees. We couldn't even find a willow to correct little boys and girls. Worst of all, not a soul she ever saw before she could go to visit." In their little log cabin, their son Grant was born in September that first year. As soon as she could travel after his birth, Father brought them to Magrath so they could be together. For 2 months, they lived in 2 tents near Father's work on the canal. There were only 3 families in Magrath then. Some lived in dugouts on the banks of the Pothole Creek until a town site was laid out. That fall it rained, so they wondered why such a country needed irrigation. That fall, Father hauled lumber 30 miles from Fort Hoopop and built a nice large room which looked like a palace after the tent and dugout. Their years of pioneering were filled with many variety of experiences. There was sickness and disease. With no doctors to attend them, they had smallpox, pneumonia, measles, mumps, and whooping cough. Neighbors helped each other, and they rallied around each other and relied on the Lord and the priest, the ministrations of the elders in time of sickness. Babies came without doctors and had only midwives. Mother never had a doctor for any of her children. In Magrath, 3 children were born, Veda, Clara, and Glenn, making a total of 8. Water for all purposes had to be hauled long distances. Barrels were used on a sled like a contraption even to start, and had a contraption even to get started. Father acquired a quarter section of land as a farm 2¼ miles from home. 2 acres as a home garden, 2 acres on which to raise hay for his work horses and dairy stock. Large farm machinery was drawn by 8 horses. He also kept a herd of dairy cows, hogs, chickens, rabbits, and etc. His home was increased to a larger one with well-kept lawns, many trees and flowers in a garden. Berry patches helped to feed the family. All were required to help with the work. He served several terms as town constable, water master for large irrigation ditches. He and his son Dan acquired a homestead of 1/2 section, 35 miles from Magrath, near the U.S. border, and used it as a cattle ranch. It had springs which provided water for hay meadows and pasture land. For 26 years, he was active in the church and town office. He was a constable at that time. He was a constable at the time of the accident, which caused the disabled hip, and a large tumor formed in the socket, paralyzing him. He was a great lover of music and nature. During his life, our childhood was filled with beautiful tenor voice, with a great source of comfort to him and his family. In times of discouragement and homesickness, there were many times he would lie on his back and his eyes closed and strum on his auto harp and sing the old songs he used to sing with his family choir back home in Utah, and as he rested for a few minutes before he resumed his work. After months of agonizing suffering, he would sing with his little grandson lying beside him, trying to sing with Grandpa. He died Easter morning, April 22nd, 1924, and was buried beside his son Dan in the cemetery where he had helped dig the graves for so many of his Canadian friends, that being one of his duties as a town constable.